Gordon's career, when you look at Melvin's career, when you look at Ossie's career, you see men who wore many, many hats and wore them very well.
The impression they made on me was, it was like looking up to a family of elders. You have the grandfather, the father, and the rude boy, fire boy, all in one.
They're all so unique in their talents. The only people you could compare them to is each other. When I think about Ossie Davis, Melvin Van Peebles, Gordon Parks, I think of three big redwoods that dominate the forest. And we've all grown under their tree cover.
I'm very fortunate to have been married to Ossie. We did a winner when we married each other, I think.
He and his wife have provided us with some of the best work that anyone could possibly offer or ask for.
What's that first thing?
Gordon Parks was a Renaissance man. I mean, you know, world-class photographer.
Good to see you. Welcome.
Also a very fine writer and composed music, just a little bit of everything. Gordon is an artist in the sense that his eye is so amazing, whether he's shooting in Brazil, or shooting in Paris, or shooting in his living room.
Mr. Van Peebles is always been a fire boy burning bright, a rocket burning at both ends, our revolutionary son.
Do you have any special makeup requests or?
Nothing legal.
Nothing. Nothing legal. Okay.
No.
And my dad, rather than just saying, "Oh, I'm gonna complain about what's out there. I'm gonna complain about the movies that are out there, and that we're just being butlers and mammies and bucks," my father said, "I'm not just gonna complain. I'm gonna do something about it. Turn on the lights, the camera, and the action." He's that kind of cat.
Oh, my goodness. Who's the easy rider here?
Hello? Ossie Davis is just one of the premier black actors of all time. It's hard to really describe him because he's so ubiquitous.
All right, boss. So, back on
They were pioneers. They are Black America on some level.
Wow, how did I get here? You're right, how did I get? Who's that I'm looking at in the mirror? Who's that?
I didn't know you were old enough to have a grandson.
I didn't either.
They're the pillars from which black film has grown under. So without them, I do not exist. No black filmmaker exists.
The three men who opened the doors to Hollywood. One of the reasons why I'm so happy and privileged to be here, because each of you have touched me. And in ways you probably don't know, so I'm going to start by saying how our lives intersected long before we met. When I was a senior in high school, as often is the case, they take you on these field trips. So I'm from East St. Louis, and they took us to St. Louis for this screening, and it was a sneak preview of a movie. And they bring students in to look at the movie to see what we thought. The movie was really great. We liked it very much. And afterwards, in the lobby was a man signing autographs. The movie, by the way, was Shaft.
You ain't so black, and you ain't so white, baby.
And I saw this guy signing autographs. I said, he's not in the movie. Why is he signing autographs? You know, because movie stars sign autographs. And my instructor put me to the side, no, you understand that he is the director. That's why he's signing autographs. And my response was, black folks make movies? Because as a young boy coming East St. Louis, which is, you know, if you know East St. Louis, it's a challenging place to be from, that possibly didn't really exist in my imagination. And then a year later, I'm now in college. I really was in the spirit of the Black Panther Party. And so I get the Black Panther Party paper. On the cover it says, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, a revolutionary film. We must go out and support it. So, of course, I'm a true believer, so I got my ticket to the box office. And I see the movie, and from the very beginning, I said, something different is happening here, because the credits said, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song starring the black community. Now, this is not ordinary credits. So I said, one, black folks can make movies, and two, we can change the content of the movies. That was it for me. I said, okay, this is a possibility. I have to pursue it. I'm going to become a filmmaker. do that, 4 years, get my degree. Now I have a degree, but where do I go? So someone said, there's a program in New York called Third World Cinema, and they're teaching you how to access the industry. Now, Mr. Davis, you are the founder of that program. So my career, my path, the doors that are open, each of you open those doors. You provide us a signpost, a pathway, a star to follow. When you guys started, that didn't exist. How'd you find your way with nobody in front of you pointing the way?
Shall I take a bite at that?
Sir, please.
Well, I was only in the business as an actor. I had no intention of becoming a director. It so turned out, under the circumstance, that I was sort of pushed into the responsibility. I also understood the importance of the director as an entity in the whole picture. I knew that actors, you know, we always like to be downstage, front and center when the curtain goes up and goes down. But I also was interested in those people who were backstage, or the guys who was counting the house, or the guys who were making things happen. And I came into the business as a writer who became an actor because that was a necessity. And being an actor, maneuvered happily into the position of a director. But I didn't set out to be the director, not at all.
Meet Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones, two cops who take charge when an $87,000 bale of cotton comes to Harlem.
You any cotton around here lately? A bale of cotton, sure. Where is it now?
Down south, cotton was king. Cotton comes to Harlem. It's cops and robbers with a shade of difference.
Cotton Comes to Harlem, when I saw the film, I loved it. And it was so clever and funny and showed all these different angles of Harlem life and really made me want to live in Harlem. So, you know, years later when I did move to Harlem, I was like, man, I'm in Harlem.
In retrospect, John Cassavetes, who's a fine actor, called me and said, I just read the Learning Tree, the book you wrote. You should make a motion picture out of it. You're talking about man directing it? He said, yeah. I said, there are not going to be any black directors in Hollywood. He said, could you come out here the day after tomorrow? And I said, wow. Yeah, to California. And I said, yes, I can get out there. He says, I want you to meet the young man who's running the studio. We're not speaking, but I'll introduce you and I'll leave. I said, all right. And, I walked into his office. The Learning Tree book was lying on the table. He gave me a cup of coffee, and Cassavetes left. He said, I just read your book, you know, and I think it's awfully good. Would you like to pick someone to write the screenplay? I said, I don't know anyone out here. He said, why don't you write the screenplay? You wrote the book. I said, well, okay. Cassavetes tells me you're a composer. He said, well, I would think you would want to compose the music for it, too. Why not? I thought he was lying to me all along. Then he said, now, since you're going to be the first black director on a major film here in Hollywood, we think you should produce it for Warner Brothers. I said, why not? Because I figured the guy was lying.
3 Cokes, Bert. With plenty of ice, huh?
3. To go.
Are we gonna live here all our lives?
Well, I hope you won't have to live here all your life. It's not all good place. Not all bad place either. Sort of like fruit on a tree. Some good, some bad. Understand? No matter if you go or stay, think of Cherokee Flats like that till the day you die. Let it be a learning tree.
Kenny Hyman says, well, you never made a film before. I think that he and Jimmy Lydon, who was his assistant. Thought eventually they would take the learning tree over when we got started out in Kansas. When we went to Kansas, I went there with a young man from Hollywood, and I was going to pick a place for my parents' home called the Winger House, and I found a place that was marvelous for it, photogenically and so forth. On the lot, a man approached us with a big shotgun and said, "Get off of my property. I know where you're from. I know you want to show white people lynching black people, and I'm going to kill you if you don't get off here within 5 minutes." We got off. Well, eventually, in the film, that guy was one of the extras and enjoyed being it.
I remember seeing The Learning Tree with my film workshop class, and it was the first time that I experienced a dramatic narrative with multi-dimensional African-American characters portrayed in it.
And The Learning Tree was his sort of take on growing up in Kansas.
It was so evocative of that era, and being a child of the 60s, it was very painful to watch those kind of memories recounted.
It was very moving and loving and kind and gentle, and this was something that, that was, totally alien to us at the time.
And at that point, Warner Brothers had never had any black directors in the lot. But because of Gordon's prestige as a visual person, his accomplishment as a writer, he was one of these super black people. You had to be a super black.
Your route was very circuitous in the sense that you didn't start in this country. You started in France and then segued back. So tell me about just your whole strategy about getting past the locked gate.
I'm a political being, and what I wanted to do was to talk to the folks in the hood. I wanted them to listen to me, but they really weren't interested that deeply in the other arts. So I asked myself, where's everybody? And they're all in the movies, they're watching the movies. So, well, if I want to talk to them, I'll do movies. However, when I made my first movies, my first little short features, my first feature was 11 minutes long, so I didn't know anything about cinema, but I taught myself, and I went down to Hollywood to get a job. And they offered me a job as an elevator operator. I said, no, you don't understand. I want to write and direct. So they offered me a job as a dancer. And broken-hearted, I went to my second love, which was mathematics, a certain type of mathematics and astronomy. However, he may not come when you call him, but he works in strange and mysterious ways, his wonders to perform and all that. I got an invitation from the Cinematheque to come to France because they'd seen these short films, which, in the insidious part of racism, people don't say, well, we're just racist, so we're not going to hire you. They say, it's obvious that you don't have the directorial eye, blah, blah, blah. If you don't have anybody in the ass, they put the psych in. You understand what I mean? So anyway, the French saw my films, and they declared me a genius. And I said, well, wow, finally somebody who understands me. So I went to France. There was a French law at the time that a French director, a French writer, could have a temporary director put his own work to the screen. So it took me 9 years to teach myself French, to get myself a job, and to publish a number of novels and do a number of journalistic jobs in France. And then one day I thought I had my psych in. By that time, I was never going to be psyched again. And I went and I said to the man, I said, mister, I'd like my director's card. He said, what? So I said, the French writer has the right to director's card, right? He said, yes. I said, well, I write in French. So I'm a French writer, right? He says, right. And that's how I got my director's card. And that's how then I made my first movie, which was Story of a 3-Day Pass.
If my captain could only see me now.
These are some of the guys from the base.
Hello? We'll let you get back to your thing, but we'll tell everybody we saw you.
I came back to the States as a French delegate to the 1967 Film Festival, San Francisco Film Festival. Meantime, just before I go back, I mind my own business, walking down the street, and who do I see but Brother Parks? and we talk. It's in Paris, Champs-Élysées.
It was a marvelous moment, too. I was with an ex-nun. Used to be a Mother Superior.
Yep. But you said X. The way she was looking.
I heard X loud and clear now.
Yeah, the way she was looking at it, I knew it was an X. It was an X. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But the marvelous thing about it, he said, "Come down the street, man. I want to show you something." I said, "Well, okay. What do you want to show me?" It was about a block and a half away on Champs-Élysées. And they took me up in the room, and they had an operator show me the film for the first time.
Wow.
Cost me $1 zillion.
Yeah. Hey, what the heck?
Well, but he had to show it, you know.
He had to show it. I had to pay the operator. Yeah. Of course, the operator gave me my kickback.
How long had you been there, Mama?
I had been there at that time 8 years.
8 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time.
Well, when I came to France, they invited me to come, and they took my little films. I hitchhiked from Holland, where I was living in Amsterdam, and the French took me up, just as I take you up, with just my little short films, and they showed me the films, and they oohed and ahed, and they came down. It was on the Champs-Élysées again, and they kissed me. I know it was August. And the lights came up, just like a bad B movie, you know. This is the French are kissing me, and so the lights come up on the Champs-Élysées. It was beautiful. And then they got in their cars and drove off, and I'm standing in the middle of the Champs-Élysées, huh? 3 cans of film, 2 wet cheeks, not a penny in my pocket, not a word of French. That was my introduction to France. But they'd done the most dangerous thing. They'd given me hope.
There you go. You gave me hope.
Yeah.
Let me in there.
So for him to go, you know what, I'm going to make movies. I've studied film in San Francisco, but I can't make a feature here. Let me go to France and make a film. That is out-the-box thinking to the ultimate. And then to make such a sweet, such a loving film that really breaks down barriers. That is, if that film were remade today, shot for shot, would be a revolutionary film.
Suddenly saying, wait a minute, you mean if these white folks over here deny you, there's a whole world out there. There's a possibility that you can go over to some other country, not speak the language, learn the language, and start directing in a whole other country. Outside the box, this guy's thinking outside the building.
It's unlikely that he would have got a chance to direct a Hollywood film any other way.
But it gave him this sense that I don't just have to count on Hollywood here. He knew that it was possible, and he made it happen, and he brought that back, and I think he's passed that on to us.
It's a constant reminder of never to accept defeat.
When the film won the San Francisco Film Festival, the French film, because I came back as a French delegate. I get off the plane, and a little old lady with blue hair said, Melvin Van Peebles, Délégation Française. Melvin Van Peebles, Délégation Française. I said, lady, she said, don't bother me, sir, I'm busy. Melvin Van Peebles, Délégation Française. I said, well, lady, I am Melvin Van Peebles. So she checked me out. Parlez-vous français? So anyway, very funny story. She was very, very aristocratic, and once you discovered I was Melvin Peebles, she was a beautiful, very nice. Your limo's waiting. Limo, shit. I was ready to hitchhike. You give me the limo, ride me into town. And 10 years earlier, wonderful coincidence, I'd been thrown out of San Francisco because I'd brought a suit against the city for discrimination. And here I am returning to the city already in triumph. Okay, so we get to the Mark Hopkins, which is the #1 hotel, and your folks were not even allowed in the Mark Hopkins when I left 10 years before. Anyway, she said, well, you're in the Mark Hopkins. Mark Hopkins? So we pull up, and there's a guy, the doorman, and you can see the look on her face. There goes the neighborhood. I mean, I told them, and anyway, they let me in, and I go upstairs to a penthouse. They had a penthouse So I hadn't eaten, so I put a chair behind the door, ate all the fruit that they had out for me, put the chair behind the door, and went to bed. The next morning, I pack all my goods, I go downstairs, and I walk through the lobby, nobody says anything, and I go over to right across the street where the film office was. And the word must have gotten out, because when I get there now, hi, oh, we're so glad to see you. He's here, he's here. And they kept doing like this, he's here. I said, what, so you're here to fix the lights, aren't you? Fix the lights? I'm the delegate. They thought...
But see, that's what really strikes me, is that your arrival on this scene was in a very different America. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, from that point of view of seeing this arc of America and the obstacles that you face and overcome, most importantly, has that not been enough change? Specifically, the opportunity for an artist to have creative expression. But those creative expressions that require capital, i.e. movies.
Yeah. As I look now at the total scene, not only do I have hope, I'm smarter than that.
There you go.
I have expectations. And the expectations are based on the history. For example, you know, we sit in the presence of the man who exemplifies the spirit of Brer Rabbit. I mean, Melvin Van Peebles is totally impossible if you approach the whole situation from logic and common sense. Melvin found a way to avoid logic, go around common sense, and still show up. We as a people have had that kind of cultural capacity, you know, to, in a sense, either invent or reinvent ourselves. So now, however we got here, we are here. Whatever the situation is, we are involved in it. And I fully expect that our being here will do as much in terms of changing and developing American cinema as our showing up in music did in changing music for America. Now, I don't know the details. I don't know exactly where the dollars are and the techniques and all, but that always follows. What is required is that deep creative spark that somehow our culture inculcates in us. And our job, part of our job, is to remind these young folks of the importance of that spark, not to smother it, not to drown it, you know, not to shove it aside, but to nurture it. You may not be able to have it at your side all the time. You may have to go out and do other things, if you know what I mean. Wash dishes, fix that electric light you were talking about. But always in the back of your mind, as soon as I can get to it, I'm going to do that thing that I came here to do. Now, Gordon, in the book Learning Tree, changed something in Hollywood, and an appetite sprang up in response to his film. And I don't know all the details of it, but before that time, you know, they had done Raised in the Sun, and everybody congratulated themselves and said, this is black film. We've done our job. But of course, black film never make any money. So there was no appetite, no market. Somehow what Gordon did opened the eyes and expectations. Now, he did affect Johnny Cassavetes. Cassavetes is not your typical Hollywood director or producer. You know, he was as weird in his way as Melvin Van Peebles. I can understand if the two of them got together, because they really are soul brothers, they were. However, with Learning Tree, something new was happening. Something Hollywood, I suppose, began to suspect that there was something out there they should concern themselves with. And at that time, Hollywood was, I think, in deep trouble.
In fact, your film, Cotton Cousin Harlem, and then Shaft, these movies are credited as really being the saviors for Hollywood, because they had really been over-bloated budgets, spending too much money, and you guys revealed to them an audience they had been overlooking.
Absolutely.
Who showed up at the box office and made the difference in their bottom lines.
Absolutely.
Shaft is a black driver dick, sex machine to all the chicks. It was a black superhero movie. I remember going with my whole floor in the projects. My mother and another one took like 11 kids to see Shaft. It showed on 45th and Broadway. It was that kind of event. And I remember walking up to the theater and had a huge cutout of Richard Roundtree with the gun. Like, you'd never seen no brother like that before. The leather jacket out, the whole thing. So Shaft was a major cultural moment for black people. The studios ended up latching on to these very creative people for different reasons.
And then Hollywood took off right after it, trying to make as many films like that as they could.
These gentlemen were people who were working in the mainstream or in other respects made that mainstream come to them.
Let's talk about women. What role have they played in your lives? And to what extent did you need them?
Women?
Women.
Well, let's start with my mama. She's 105 and still around.
Fantastic.
And still a powerful influence on me. Of course, the most obvious obvious connection is that I am, of course, married to an actress, to Ruby Dee, and been married about 55 years. She has had and still has a tremendous influence on my life. I don't need to be specific, but I could. In my situation, Ruby is my partner in a production company that we own. She's a writer, I'm a writer. She's an actor, I'm an actor. She's directed and I've directed. So it's a kind of extended togetherness. We do things together sort of automatically, and she is an associate and a critic, and she works cheap, and that for me, and I like that. But the advantage I've had in being associated with Ruby is that from the breakfast table to the actual situation, there's always somebody to whom I can instantly relate. And our life consists of continuing conversations, some of which have been going on for years. You know, things that we're concerned about, plans together, things that have to do with film, things that have to do with children, things having to do with what our people are concerned with. The whole total picture of my life in all aspects, creative and otherwise, is so mixed up with hers that I really would find it difficult to say, particularly in creative activity, where her influence stops and mine begins.
Pass along. Women, how central are they to your life in terms of you need them as an artist?
Well, I never felt that I actually needed them as an artist.
Okay.
My mother died when I was 15. She taught me, even before she died, that I must not come home complaining that I couldn't do something because I was black. Her statement always to me was, if a white boy can do it, you can do it, and you can do it better. And don't come home if you don't do it better. It's that type of, and I think that stuck with me, but she was a sweet, wonderful woman. Now, down through the years, people ask me, why do you do so many things? Why do you work at so many things? I think if you have 3 ex-wives like I did, you better work hard. And they've played different roles in my life. My first wife didn't understand me, or what I was doing. My second wife understood somewhat, traveled with me, encouraged me, and so forth. Third wife was the editor of at least 3 of my books, and a very bright, very wonderful woman who possibly didn't think I could write. But she was my editor, and she has now changed her mind. But women have been a tremendous influence in my life. I'll say that. Different women from different walks of life. I think Ingrid Bergman was the first woman to encourage me to even think about making film. I was on Stromboli with her. She and Roberta had their affair there. She wanted me to stay and help Roberta on the film because the film was not going well, and Roberta had kicked all the newsmen off the island. So she said, would you stay and work with Roberta, because where you're photographing me are the places he should be doing the motion picture.
Wow.
And I said, Roberta's got too much of an ego. He's not going to do it. She said, well, I'll ask him. I'll let you know at dinner. She says, you won't do it. I said, well, I told you that. But by telling me that she liked what I was picking, the locations and so forth, made me start thinking about doing more films and so forth. And she wrote me a couple of times and said, I hope you're into the films.
Mr. Van Peebles, I can't wait to hear.
I'm so much of a loner, so I find women as equally interesting as men. But without the women, you wouldn't have the men. Without the men, you wouldn't have the women, and see all the dance. And you must remember this. The kiss is good. So I find that interesting. So therefore useful. Probably most importantly, I'm not sure if my muse is a woman or gay. I haven't figured that out yet. And let's say that the muse is gay. Whenever I want to do something, I come up with sort of an idea. I go to my muse, and my muse has always got an attitude, always. But I haven't seen you, haven't been around. Come on, help me out. No, just forget it. So I'm required to have an argument with her, and which ends with my getting angry. And I said, forget it, you know what I'm saying? I'll do it myself. I take out my notes, and I'm working, but the muse cannot stand for me to be working without her. And she'll come back and she'll look over my shoulder. No, that's not right. You should do. I take notes on what she's saying. That's all right. So that is probably the most influential, if it is a lady, in my life. Otherwise,
I think that whether his muse is feminine or a child or an angel or whatever, there's something very pure about it. And he allows that purity to come in, and he looks at it and says, okay, that's what you brought me. That's the gift. And I'm gonna try to make that happen. And he's an amazing cat.
During that time, film wasn't trendy. Being a filmmaker was like, I guess, close to being a geek.
Pretty much, when you're looking at the 60s into the 70s, there had been no black directors working in Hollywood film. They just weren't getting any love. I mean, you couldn't even get in a set, much less as anything but a grip if you were lucky.
Then here come these guys, you know, I get to see on television, you know, Gordon Parks directing Shaft. You know, that was, you know, in downtown Manhattan. It was unheard of at the time. And I could tell my mother, see, that's what I want to do.
What Ozzie and Gordon and Melvin Van Peebles showed us was that it could be done.
The writer Albert Murray has said that the musician is really the featured artist of the black experience, and that the playwrights and the novelists and the poets and the filmmakers have yet to achieve the level of articulation that musicians have.
Right. Historically, if you look at our situation, you'd understand why that is so. Those who brought us to this country denied us our culture, our language, our heritage for reasons of their own. And they made it impossible. Sometimes you could be put in jail for teaching a slave to read. They understood the importance of words and thoughts, and they kept those things from us as much as they could. So to some degree, we had to learn to communicate non-verbally. And a part of the non-verbalization of our culture led us to express in music what we couldn't express in words. You know, a man like Louis Armstrong, for instance,
Oh, absolutely.
whom I knew and everybody knows and loves. And Louis was always out there with the handkerchief and teeth, oh yes, and whatever, and stuff like that. And as a kid, sometimes I used to think, man, I didn't like him, I didn't like that. But when Louis dropped that persona and put the horn to his lips, he could kill a man. So he learned the power that he had to come through the horn. So the culture that we inherit in which we work tends to deverbalize us. So our writers and our word workers come late to the process. The musicians got there earlier, and the dancers, so they're a bit ahead of us. But give us time and we'll catch up.
It took me many, many years to do Daughters of the Dust, and I did it. And I got it released. And I remember Melvin once saying, whatever you do it better than anyone ever expects you would. Never forgot that.
Action!
I'm a filmmaker. I'll work in any medium I can, if I have to, and I make films, personal films as well as commercial films.
Cut.
And so it doesn't matter if it takes several years in between our productions. We're unstoppable.
Oftentimes, we are pitching ideas to people who have no clue. I've been in a meeting at a major TV network, and they would say they want to do movies of the week. I said, well, let's do the Katherine Dunham story. And they said, we never heard of Katherine Dunham. And I was just flabbergasted. How do you have this job if you don't know who Katherine Dunham is?
But those battles that you have to go through as an independent are very difficult, added on a large percent because of color. But after that, you have the problem of distribution, and then you're up against the same old racist guys because of distributor. So we still have that problem to overcome. Eventually, we're going to have a larger distribution, and we already have it in straight-to-video, the DVD, Master P, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for the moment, the gatekeepers at the door are still very much in the status quo mode.
Does the difficulties of working inside the studio, inside the Hollywood system, is that better or worse than the obstacles you face when you work outside independently?
Depends.
Yeah.
If somebody walks up to you independently and gives you a bundle of money, it's better outside.
Okay.
When Melvin did Sweetback, there really wasn't the independent film movement as we understand it. The whole world of independent film that we take for granted now, the Miramaxes and Spike Lees and all of that stuff, doesn't exist at all when he puts out Sweetback. So he has to invent the wheel in terms of distribution, in terms of visibility. So Melvin's Sweetback was a breakthrough on a number of levels. You just weren't, and for a film that was made outside of Hollywood, period, forget black film, to do as well as Sweetback did, to have the impact Sweetback did, it's amazing.
And my dad was just, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to make it my damn self. If I have to do it non-union, if I have to get shot at, if I have to die trying, if I have to use my father, if I have to use my son, if I have to borrow money from Bill Cosby, if I have to risk everything I have, I'm going to get it done by any means necessary. And there's a purity in that.
The thing that's so striking when you watch Sweetback today is that it's an avant-garde film. And we talk so much about Sweetback as a political statement and as a bellwether for the black film movement, so as an economic milestone. But as a movie, it's so avant-garde, it's so freaky, and it's interesting that it became a mainstream hit. And I think it was able to do that because the subject matter was so powerful that audiences were willing to take unconventional storytelling.
I mean, the way to look at Sweetback today is to look at Michael Moore's film, in the sense that it was that controversial, it was that trail-breaking, and it was that kind of media buzz around it that they have around Fahrenheit 9/11. there was a very similar, if you look back at the media coverage, Sweetback was that kind of outrageous statement that polarized people. And you had literally, when it started hitting people, groups of people go together, 20, 30 people, sit, watch the thing, cheer at different moments, talk back to the screen, and talk about the film.
So what Melvin Van Peebles did, in particular, and Ossie and Gordon did, was put on the silver screen the Black Power movement.
We had an anniversary screening of Shaft at the Lowe's Astor Plaza in Manhattan. And we were sitting backstage waiting to go on to talk about the film. And I turned to you and said, you know, there's a character in Shaft named Bumpy Johnson. And I said, is he based on the New York gangster Bumpy Johnson? And you turned to me and said, oh, you know about this. And you began to tell me how he was an incredible Renaissance man. And gave me my quick, 10-second education on Bumpy Johnson. Then, as luck would have it, the next week I was with Mr. In backstage doing makeup, and I said, I just talked to Gordon Parks. He mentioned Bumpy Johnson. Did you know Bumpy Johnson? And then you told me, yes, I knew him. I met him the night Malcolm was shot. Here are two people intersecting with this evidently a really amazing man. And in many ways, you guys, in my view, are the same tribe. People who defy categories, defy convention, who work outside the box. And so when I asked you the question about who really captured your imagination, people like that, who just by Americans' presumption about who we are should not exist. You guys, each of you shouldn't exist by America's presumptions, and Bumpy Johnson shouldn't exist. So of that tribe, who really captures your imagination?
Malcolm X and I became great friends. Okay. I thought he was a fascinating character. When I first met him, there was a problem in the black press, feeling as though that I was working for Life magazine, a white magazine, and that I probably wouldn't be right to have around the Black Panthers and Stokely Carmichael and all the rest of them.
But Life magazine was about the pictures. It was big format. The picture reproduction was superb. Gorgeous black and white and later color. And Gordon was in there with all of the heavy, heavy photographers in this country.
I had no idea that some of the photographs that I love so much, he had actually shot those.
He shot everything from Harlem gangsters in the 40s. He shot the favelas and the ghettos of Brazil. He shot the Paris fashion collections. He shot Malcolm X. He did the gamut.
Life magazine wanted very much to get into Malcolm X and into the Muslims and into the Panthers. But they knew there was going to be a tough job. They sent Eve Arnold in at first, a white woman. They jived her. She didn't get anything. Then one day they asked me, can you do it? I said, I don't know. I will try. But I met Malcolm the afternoon. He was up on 135th Street cussing out a bunch of white cops who were on horseback. There was a mob scene up there. So I followed him down to the restaurant, the Shabazz restaurant. I introduced myself. He said, yeah, I know who you are, just like that. He said, you want to do a story on us? Or you want to photograph us? Elijah Muhammad has to give you permission. So he went with me, and the first thing Elijah Muhammad asked me when he came into the room was, why are you working for the White Devils? Well, that told me right there I was in problem. I tried to give him this stuff about being inside, and he said, I don't buy that. We only had about a half hour with Elijah Muhammad. We got back on the plane, Malcolm X said, I think he likes you. I said, well, he had a damn poor way of showing it. He said, I think he'll invite you back. He did invite me back. He did invite me to go to the Muslim. When I did the Muslim story, then the Panthers, all of them embraced me. But I had to prove myself. And I had to tell Life magazine, look, I have to do my reporting on the Muslims in my own fashion. I can't have a white reporter saying this or saying that if he wasn't there. You know, the Muslims and the Panthers. I told both of them, I said, look, I'm here to report. Now, if you want, I'm a black man on life staff and the only photographer there. If I don't go back and report honestly, and you don't want me to see it, send me home, okay? And that's the way it went. And Malcolm, I would love to have done a film on him because I wanted more than what was shown to the man, you know. Because he had a lot behind him that people don't know about.
I see you were also close to Malcolm. You also supported Martin Luther King as well. Perhaps a lazy thinker, one would say, how do you support both Malcolm and Martin?
Oh, it wasn't all that difficult. As a matter of fact, on a Saturday, maybe a month or so before Malcolm died, Ruby Dee and Juanita Poitier, Sidney's wife, had a meeting up at her house at which black leadership was called to spend some time together. Malcolm came, Martin didn't come because he was in prison. Whitney Young came, Dorothy Hyde came, A. Philip Randolph came, Lorraine Hansberry came. So even at the time of his death, they were moving toward convergence. Oh, yeah. And Malcolm, being one of the brightest of all, was very desirous of finding a way to establish himself among that group, that leadership. Remember, he had left his old institution, but had not yet found the new institution. And the enemies caught him in between before he got across the way he was going. But Malcolm would have found some way to have been of tremendous help to them all. And those who knew and met him personally understood that.
Both of us were formed by that kind of immature, I call it, behavior of a country struggling to be intelligent, compassionate, sharing, and struggling for its identity, struggling for what it was to become. So that became the task. We recognized the task of helping America become what it should be. This business of civil rights. Was there anything else to be about?
But Hollywood was still making us look like we were butlers and, you know, and maids and all that. What Gordon and Melvin and Ossie did was say, we're stepping out of that and we're going to be this whole different cat. People can say what they want about the 70s, or those films, blaxploitation, if you want to call them that, or soul cinema, as I call it, but it beat the hell out of the Motisa tribe. You know, the catch is Motisa, you know, and they laid us out.
Gordon, in your book, A Choice of Weapons, you posed the question that a choice must be made, and we know what choice you made as an artist. But before you made that choice of artistic expression, what other choices did you consider?
Well, I considered slashing some throats.
Uh-oh.
I knew that was the wrong way. And I decided to listen to my father and my mother's teachings.
There's a certain kind of dignity, poise, posture, pride in articulation, pride in erudition. I mean, they wanted to speak well, they wanted to move well, they knew which fork to use. I mean, you know, they really prided themselves on, they could move in any circle. It's not to say that these guys weren't down brothers. It's not to say that Melvin or Ossie couldn't hang out with you in a bar and kick it and have a good time. But they had another side as well. They had several levels to their game. And now we have a lot of people who, we pride ourselves on being at one dimension and using that one dimension, and that one dimension is the only black reality.
But if you look at the era that Melvin and Ossie and Gordon grew up in, those were truly periods that were horrific for any black American. So for them to reach the levels of achievement that they did, not only in one medium, but in multiple mediums, It's unbelievable.
When you look at Shaft, Shaft is, you know, is Gordon. Shaft is a man who has a place in the Village, but he also can move in Midtown Manhattan and make moves. He can go uptown. And Gordon's career was that ability to be all. In fact, almost all of the guys we're talking about, Melvin, Ossie, Gordon, of course, the Shaft idea of this very socially mobile urban black man who can move in these different spaces and exist in them and make money in them and be comfortable in them and yet still remain who he is. I mean, that's why Shaft is such a strong character to me. It's not so much that he kicked ass or anything, but that he had this mobility at a time when black people were just beginning to have that mobility. You know what I mean? The social mobility that these guys displayed in the 60s and the early 70s, in a way, predates what the black puppy could do or what the black bohemian guy could do now, where you can go anywhere and do anything and be anybody you want to be if you really want to do that and make those moves. They were doing this back when other people weren't doing it.
You never know what's going to come from them, but it's always going to be something that's inspiring and that you know, that it ruptures the everyday norm of your way of thinking.
And I always think of, particularly Gordon and Melvin, who I know the best, as very much role models for me. Not so much any individual work they made, but because of the quality of their lives, the fact that they were able to make moves in different places, were able to be socially comfortable, and yet remain who they were. You know, Melvin's Melvin. I don't think Melvin's changed for anybody. And Gordon is, you know, the most elegant guy you can possibly meet to this day. Women meet Gordon to this day. And, you know, he takes their hand and looks them in the eye, and they're feeling them right now.
I had experience, and you may have had a similar one, but it was deeply disturbing to me about working inside the system. I had acquired the rights to a novel called The Middle Passage. Charles Johnson is the author. It's really just a very distinguished book. And as always, you have a movie in the development, you come on the screenplay, and the junior executive I met with asked me, let's work through the story and the characters and the motivation. And in the first 5 minutes, I knew I was in trouble because the man asked me, tell me again, why do the slaves want to be free? And I said, now, do I leave? Do I smack him? How do you continue? Yet these people had the dollars to make this happen. Ultimately, it didn't happen, by the way. And my rights expired. It went to John Singleton. It expired on him, too. It's an extraordinary novel that never came to pass. So it leads me to my question to each of you. Is there a movie that was the one you yet to do, that is, you can just taste it? It's the story you must tell. What movie is that for each of you?
Toussaint Louverture, the Haitian revolutionary, certainly would be one of the people I would want to pursue. And then Alexander Pushkin, the poet in Russia, I would want to make a film about power, how they got it and how they used it.
In fact, they brought me to Russia to do Pushkin.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
How'd you do it?
No, we were about ready to do it, and ever who was in charge lost power.
Power.
And they didn't like Pushkin.
Yeah.
And so I packed up and came back to America. And what the hell?
Yeah, those regime changes at studios are like being caught in drive-bys, you know. And it's
national drive-bys.
International drive-bys.
Yeah.
So, Melvin, I know you always have movies in your back pocket. So what is the one that, you can pick one. Which one would it be?
The muse says everything.
I hear
All of them. Excuse me. A little more of a hooker than that. The first thing I taught my kids when I'm teaching business, when somebody walks up to you and says, what are you selling? There's only one answer. What are you buying?
There you go.
If they say I'm buying bicycles, wait a minute, I'll be back with a bicycle. I don't care. Remember Key Largo? And at one point, Humphrey Bogart, who's a veteran, returned from the war, and he was talking to Edward G. Robinson on this boat, and they were going to Key Largo, and it was rocking back and forth. And Edward G. Robinson had been a profiteer on the war. He said, you're slime, Johnny Rocco. Blah, 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 blah. What do you want, Johnny Rocco? And Johnny Rocco says, you don't even know what you want, Johnny Rocco. He said, I'll tell you what you want. You want more. John Rocco goes, yeah, that's right, more. So that's me. What do I want? More.
My dad's approach was, I'm not messing around. And he seemed to be able to jump us so far ahead politically and cinematically because he was very honest about that.
He's Jeff Gerber from suburbia. Average, affluent, and arrogant. But a funny thing happened to Jeff Gerber last night.
I remember going to see Watermelon Man at the Shop City Drive-In in East St. Louis, Illinois, because that's the only movie theater that was in East St. Louis, Illinois.
When we got married, I had no idea it was going to be an interracial thing. You never told me.
Well, I just got wind of it myself.
Melvin was selected or asked or recruited, however we put it, to direct this film. And so it was a huge breakthrough. And it really played to a lot of Melvin's strengths, because Melvin is a satirist in a lot of ways. He's a commentator on the world.
Don't you have anything you want to say to me?
Your face is dirty.
That's a nice thing to say to your father.
Sure is a heck of a tan you got, Dad.
So there was every reason to go see Watermelon Man. And when I saw the film, it was mind-blowing because it was funny, and then it got deeper and deeper and deeper.
He got a chance to do a very high-profile Hollywood film that dealt with race.
It's quite possible that somewhere in your lineage there is a Negro strain.
You're looking at a strained Negro right now, Doc.
And it made a huge impression on me because it showed how you can do black political satire and how you should not be scared of going there. I mean, he went there all the way in terms of all the implications of a white man turning black.
You got enough milk?
Yeah.
You think you're getting any whiter?
No, but my skin is getting lovely and soft.
You know, what the studios wanted was a comedy about some poor white guy that goes to sleep one day and wakes up black. My dad reads the script, goes, and they thought, well, what white guy can we get to play black? And my dad said, well, wait a minute, man, the guy's black 80% or 70% of the movie.
Gerber, what the hell have you been doing? Sitting under a sun lamp?
Oh, that's the nicest thing you ever said to me, sir.
They said, yeah, we know that, Mel. So we need a white guy that can really convince the brothers. I said, well, why don't we go the other way? What do you mean? Why don't we get a brother who can play white? The thought had never occurred to them. And that was like, wait a minute, how could you play us? And of course, we see you every day, man. I mean, so Godfrey Cambridge goes in there and plays it. So right away, he sort of stood it on its ear.
To have overcome the societal obstacles, the constant degradation to your spirit that says you can't do something, you don't have the inner capacity to do it, and you're certainly not going to have any support from the outside world. But for them to overcome all those obstacles, grab their bootstraps, and to achieve at the highest level, they're a different kind of man.
It was interesting for me when I first came out to Hollywood and I started acting. And I said, who are the cats that can get movies done? It was Bill Cosby, Whoopi Goldberg, Richard Pryor, and Eddie Murphy. What do they all have in common? They can all do comedy. I went back to my dad. I said, hey, man, we're always playing the funny guy or the best friend, and I don't mind that. But we're never the lead. And I thought about what he had done with Sweetback, some 20 years earlier. And he said, hey, that's one of the reasons I started directing and creating. And I went back to Hollywood and I put my acting on hold and I started trying to direct. And eventually I got to direct New Jack City. And when I directed it, I was able to go to Wesley Snipes and say, I'm not just trying to put you in this movie as a best friend or as a funny guy, but you're gonna be the guy. Now that doesn't mean anything except for when those movies make money. Hollywood, as my dad always said, had an Achilles pocketbook, so when those movies blow up, suddenly they're able to put Wesley Snipes in Passenger 57, even though it's not written black, put Denzel in Pelican Brief, put Larry Fishburne in Bad Company, and now up to Matrix. So we changed the game, and I got to be a part of that as a filmmaker.
One of the things each of you have told me in the past is that this journey we're on, this struggle for human rights and dignity through the arts, through artistic expression, it's not so much an individual race, but a relay race. And to the extent that we pass on that baton, eventually, we as a people get there.
You know, I'd like to speak for our guys. I'm very proud that in the film industry, most of the young people who picked up the baton haven't gotten all washed away with just the bling-bling of it, are moving forward. And many times there's criticism of it, but we don't have the control yet. Right. Then when we have the control, we will find out what they have to say. And I'm sure as Gordon, as Ozzy, as yourself, and the others, there are people who are going to stand up for us. We just got to get our weapons together. We got to get them together. But it's going to happen. You agree with me, gentlemen?
Very definitely so. We have in the past always been able to rise to the occasion presented to us by circumstances, whether those occasions were positive or negative. And sometimes they looked as if they might destroy us. We live at this moment in parlous times on the international scene and here at home. We don't know exactly what the next step civilization itself is going to take, but we do know that it will take that step. And on the basis of what we have done in the past and the basis of how we do it, I'm calling on my own people to reach back into the pot one more time and come out with the mojo and the Brer Rabbit and the magic and the High John the Conqueror that it's going to take. What we need now is a new way to be black, a new way to apply all that we have learned from the past. And right now there's a lot of spinning around, bumping into each other. It's night, and we don't see very clearly. And a lot of things are happening which we don't thoroughly understand. But as time goes by, we will pick up the beat. We will catch the keynote. Then we'll be able to put our instruments to our lips and add to the symphony. And I'm sure our addition will change the whole thing for the better. I can't wait to be as black in the 21st century as I was in the 20th.
And let me say, when that happens, the song we play is the ones you three started. You set the tempo, you set the harmony, you set the melody, and we will continue. Thank you all. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, my brother.
They have such incredible stories and such incredible wisdom, and all three of them have been so kind to me and so encouraging. It's just great to let them know how much I love and appreciate them.
I can yak all day with these guys, so you gotta stop me.
Those directors in the past and have now opened the door for those who are taking deeper looks into the human personality and making a difference.
We understand that we stand on the shoulders of the folks that came before us. And what Ozzy and Gordon and Melvin Van Peebles showed us was that it could be done.
The unstoppable inspiration I drew from them was that I don't give up, I don't stop.
Melvin Van Peebles did his thing and walked off into the sunset. Ossie Davis did his thing and walked off into the sunset. Gordon Parks and his son did their thing and showed us it was possible. And one, you can't beat that, man. That's three heroes. To me, that's three the hard way right there. That's the real three the hard way.